So we're looking then at another poem from the AQA anthology, and this time we're looking at Brendon Gallacher. And to start off with, we have 5 stanzas that are quite equal in length, and this actually shows that this is all carefully pieced together, which is important because it shows that it's put together with respect, and obviously some kind of obituary being written or some kind of eulogy being read for a dead person, obviously. And this shows how important this person was to us, not just a childhood memory that she mocks herself for actually remembering, or childhood friend, imaginary childhood friend, sorry, that she mocks herself for remembering. In this way she actually celebrates it and refers to the importance that he played in her life at that point. Again, the use of another voice is really important in the structure, because here we obviously have the girl talking to us all the way through, and we have the mother talking here, and that she's talking to Miss Moya, and obviously in inviting this person round, Brendon Gallacher round, which is actually really interesting. It's also really interesting because we learn a lot from the mum in that, because I don't think this name is accidentally used. The Moya name is quite a common one, quite a powerful one, quite a prestigious one in Scotland, but moreover it has links to kind of bravery, and it says a lot about the mum in terms of, you know, maybe she knew for a long time that Brendon Gallacher wasn't real, and that was kind of a preamble to kind of busting her daughter's myth, etc. And maybe, you know, this is a mother being cruel to be kind, you know, trying to get her out of this imaginary friend idea to actually go and make new and real friends, etc. We've got the refrain for the elements where she's talking about my Brendon Gallacher again, which shows her possessiveness and how much she cares about this person, and obviously how her ownership of him again, which kind of gives us first of all that how important he was, and second of all the fact that she's just made him up, because she literally is hers. There is no there is no Brendon Gallacher. We've got that in that section, and we've got it in that section, my Brendon Gallacher, and we've got it in the last section of my Brendon Gallacher. And that's really important that it's missing in the 2 stanzas where the mother really gets involved. So here where the mother asks first time, we don't have any reference to him again, because it's almost like a bump to reality, a drop into reality here. She can't have him in the same place where her mum starts talking to her, and again here. And even though the mother's conversation kind of flows onto this one, you know, the only time he talks about them is when he's dead, so it's a different reference to my Brendon Gallacher to my Brendon Gallacher up here, because obviously this one is more of a lament of loss, whereas this one is actually a kind of proud ownership. So it's interesting to note that there is a refrain, and also that the refrain actually comes across in different ways. Structurally as well, we've got enjambment moving on from here. Then one day after, we've been 2 friends for 2 years, one day when it was, and it's really interesting that we've got the enjambment going across there, obviously because it kind of makes us pause before we actually go into it. And obviously if it was one day with a capital, obviously we'd have a link to you know, something grand or important happening, but here the enjambment allows us to start with small o, which just kind of shows that everything here is going to be quite low-key and obviously quite sad. And that's actually kind of echoed straight afterwards when it says when it was pouring and I was indoors, which is interesting because maybe at that point, you know, her mum's actually hearing her talking or whispering to Brendon as that's going on, you know, because the child is no longer outside, you know, kind of living this fantasy that she used to have with Brendon, you know, when they actually used to go and play outside. Maybe her mum's caught her there, and then, you know, she has to kind of burst the bubble, so to speak, in the most nice painless way that she can think of. So meanings then, what does it get us thinking about? Well, it gets us thinking about the importance of childhood friends. Obviously, you know, Brendon Gallacher has been created here because the girl in it needs someone to talk to or wants someone to talk to, etc. Obviously, you know, it's a point of pride for her as well that, you know, she tells her mum about her, and obviously, you know, we talk, etc., etc. And you know, he's got a more interesting life from her, and maybe that's something she needs. You know, maybe she's you know, quite bored, or maybe she just hasn't got many friends, and obviously she needs to actually create it. The power of the imagination that she has, you know, she gives him a whole kind of world and backstory. You know, his father was in prison because he was a cat burglar. He had 6 brothers, etc., etc., etc. You know, talk about his mom and, you know, getting out of Glasgow. So then there's the kind of the power of imagination, and, you know, maybe just honed ambition in a different way. Maybe that's what this girl wants to do, but, you know, she's putting it through to this other person. You know, this other person isn't lonely like her. You know, this person has 6 brothers. Again, could be a subconscious reflection on what she wants. We've got the meanings of the meaning or the idea of parents bringing us back to reality, because obviously her mom in the stanzas, as mentioned earlier, where Brendon Gallacher isn't mentioned in terms of her being the ownership that she actually states over him there. It is really important that her mum kind of brings it back to reality, and you're saying, well, why don't you bring this person around to dinner? And obviously, because he's not real, he can't. And obviously, she jumps into a huge defensive with the repetition of no, I'd say again, which kind of indicates that she's trying to hide something because she over defends that. The idea also of parents bring us to reality, obviously, in the fact that she says there have never been any Gallaghers next door, and that's really important. The address that the girl said that Brendon lived at, that's really important because obviously at that point, her mum has found her out, and the imaginary friend is there died, and maybe that's not just about imaginary friends. You could stretch that and say maybe that's about kind of dreams, hopes, ambitions, and ridiculousness. Because parents sometimes we might feel that they limit us in some ways, but a lot of the time they're just doing what's best for us. And I can tell you this, even though it's irrelevant to the poem, after I had my first child, I realized how right my mom was about so much. So take from that what you will. I don't mean to put that parent not bring us to reality in a negative way. I'd put it in a positive light as well. Maybe one of the meanings as well is the need to rebel, and again in that maybe this he'd hold my hand and take me by the river. Maybe that's kind of like an expression of freedom, being close to someone else, or maybe that's an expression of the kind of the security, the comfort. That's what she needed at the time, someone to understand and hold her hand, etc. So you can take it as a need to rebel, perhaps, and that's why I've put a question mark after it, because it could be taken both ways. And obviously all the ideas in terms of what he the fact that he's actually going to get away, he's going to leave Glasgow, and maybe that's what she wants to do as well. She doesn't want to just kind of stay in a town where she might see already that her options are going to be limited, or she's going to be the same as everyone else. She wants to go out, rebel against that, and become something different. So the images we get then, we've got these fantastical images, obviously, as mentioned, of Brendon's family. That he's got 6 brothers. That's quite big for the time, or quite big actually, just by now today's standards, should I say. His father's in prison, his mum drinks, etc, 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 so he's got all that. And then after death, actually I'll come to that in a second, we've also got the care and connection in terms of obviously her mum speaking to her, etc, etc, and then how they'd go down by the river, a very kind of secluded, safe spot. Again, it's just kind of supposed to be quite a serene area, where they're actually they're the only ones there, etc. We've got the image of I think it's a really interesting image actually of this happy Brendon. The happy Brendon, obviously we don't have any kind of physical description of Brendon at the beginning, so again it's kind of more the purpose he served rather than how he looked. But when he's dead, we get a clear look at what he was what he was shaped like, and we find out there that he had spiky hair, an impish grin, and he had a funny flapping ear, and in all that it's actually very positive. And we don't kind of normally see people or images of people or told of people who kind of die in that kind of like grinning sense. Obviously that's kind of like got the impish part obviously is like a fairy tale creature, so it kind of gives us the idea that this was all imagination anyway. But moreover, we just got this kind of very kind of lively, this kind of lively dead person is still funny, this spiky and the impish grin, imagine them all on his face. And that's interesting because when we look at the idea of him dying there, he doesn't die because he was never alive. So, and obviously in her writing this about him, he's as alive as he ever was, etc. Or maybe then he just died in kind of the purpose that he served her. So it's obviously quite an interesting. Obviously, you can look at analysing the word "died" there, what it really means. Obviously, if it's relevant to your essay as well. So we look at some of the language. We find that again we've got the ownership, use of the word "my." We've got the childlikeness in the use of the word "daddy," etc. And obviously in the way that she has to answer to her mum. She has to ask for her permission, her mum's permission. Her mum's. Still kind of give her an advice and I'll have him around for dinner. It's a very childlike thing. It's not really turn 40 and your parents say that to you. The alliteration a little later on here when we have the funny flapping ear, again that's just it. Not only is it alliteration itself, which obviously gives it kind of a smooth move, and obviously a smooth move off the tongue, but also a very vivid image, but it's also really at odds with death. So it's a wonderful kind of contrasting image actually being presented to us. This dead happy person that obviously for all intents and purposes still feels very alive. And again, I think it's very important that the only physical description we have of him is far later than the kind of the purpose descriptions that are actually served to us a little earlier on. So again, what does this make us think of? Well, it makes us think about the effect on us is perhaps think about childhood and the stuff we made up and the stuff people do make up and why we make them up. Is it because we want attention, or is it because we are trying to fulfill a need of something that's missing for us? And you could ask yourself in this, are the parents, the parents mentioned of Brendon Gallacher, are they just reflections of her own parents, and that's why they connect, and that's why they talk the whole time, because it's what she wants to talk about. You can ask yourself that. It could be the idea of a need for drama in life, just kind of growing up in certain places might not be as fun as one would wish, and obviously then people actually start creating ideas in their head, although I wouldn't kind of use that in a very in a very kind of forceful way. Just always mention it as it could be, because obviously children have imagination, and they should have imagination, far more imagination, some would say, than adults, and that allows her to make this world where Brendon exists. And so obviously that need for drama, I'm not using drama there in a bad sense necessarily. And also the idea of parents' care, which is a really interesting kind of flip on it, because her mum's, first of all, could just be worried about her, thinking that this Brendon Gallacher person is real, and therefore goes to kind of speak with the neighbours and actually find out what these people are like, so she makes sure that her daughter's hanging around with someone who's good for her. Or it could be completely in the fact that her mum knows that this is all made up, and again she just wants to kind of bring her back to reality and finding real friends.